just so you know, you're being recorded. I will at least share the recording with all the registered attendees on Meetup. So, yeah, if someone would like to have dinner at some point or something like that, you could leave and yeah, watch the recording later on. Yeah.
Well, I know for one, I have to go and take some kids over someplace fairly soon for lunch, because over here we're just at 11:30. So I know I'm going to be watching back for a couple of these other presentations myself.
Some kids. Just
an indeterminate number of children.
Yeah, some random kids from the street, I guess, or. That's very kind of you.
During my presentation, we may or may not have audience members that join. We'll see.
But well, it's time. So yeah, you're up, Jason, I guess, to talk a little about what's new in Sitecore 10.
I'll grab the ball here, and
yes.
I mean, hopefully everybody is kind of familiar with the very, very basics of what's happened. And I've released a bunch of blogs, and a whole bunch of community articles are out there, and I've got a video up on YouTube on stuff. So really, I think for me, what the most valuable things that's going to happen here at the meetup is the discussion part. So while we've got 5 minutes left, I'm going to see if I can kind of go through the highlights on fast mode here, so we can get to that discussion part, because I'd like to hear what your questions are. I'd like to hear what is it that you'd like to know more about what's come out here. You should be seeing a beautiful screen saying what's new in Sitecore 10 at this point. And I think when I looked at the release and I was looking through all the release notes and all the stuff from the product team, I saw kind of a theme of efficiency, particularly efficiency between marketing and IT. Like, what was the goal? It looked like we were trying to get these teams to work together and deliver at the speed each of them wants to work, trying to reduce that friction. And so I found that what we wanted to do here was, focus on time to market, usability, performance, a lot of those good things that we often, we talk about. But I think that what we saw in this release and was a lot of stuff that was targeted specifically at those areas. And because, I always love talking tech first, I want to get into kind of the tech team changes. Because really, if we look at it, I mean, it's been a while since we've had a big tech release like this. I'm thinking back to, like, it was probably Sitecore 7 before we had, like, that was the last time we had like a big, huge release. There was a lot of just tech stuff in it. And there were a lot of changes that happened. And I think we all have done Sitecore for a while, and there's a lot of options. You can build so many ways. Sometimes that flexibility is probably not, the bonus for some teams that others would have. But in this release, we added even more flexibility, mainly around feedback that we were hearing around how do we get container infrastructures. The community was really spearheading this and running it and trying to get that going. Headless development with big JSS, huge hit. A lot of people liked it. Some didn't particularly want to go and learn JavaScript. So how do we get that for .NET developers? People have been asking for Sitecore to run on ASP.NET Core for a while now too. And a lot of feedback we were hearing, there was a lot of debate in the community around serialization tooling. So how do we address kind of what's going on there and the feedback that we had? So one of the big things, obviously, Docker, Kubernetes, Sitecore provided image repositories, getting those delivery teams into that continuous delivery model, infrastructure as code deployments, trying to do better team onboarding. I think that was a big deal, and a lot of what people talk about in Sitecore 10 was getting that to be from Sitecore, having the ability to go faster and get started quicker. And that was all done as an additional choice on top of the existing options. And now on the ASP.NET Core front and headless, the new ASP.NET Core SDK really addresses some of that. So it gives you the ability to work like you did in JSS, but with .NET technology you want. And also it incorporates all that feedback that we got around JSS and how to, really customers and developers and partners that were working with it, enhancing. And now JSS and the ASP.NET Core SDK, they use the same headless services. So you kind of just, it's another client SDK on top of it. Another big piece was introducing Sitecore CLI and Sitecore Visual Studio tools. This gives us a way for individual team members to work the way they want with serialization and automate those content changes. Maybe it's between environments. Maybe you're automating just sharing amongst your team, but letting someone who wants to work in the command line do that. Someone who wants to work in the plugin, do that. So diving into containers, I think those of you who have gone into the containers know what the importance here is. But if you haven't been looking at it and you're wondering, I think if you've ever had to go and be a developer working on a virtual machine somewhere, you know how painful that is, how much it takes up on your hard drive. And doing a local installation and trying to switch between VHDs, it's not easy. The Docker-driven development model really helps with that. And it also allows you to start moving between environments pretty well. Your infrastructure flow starts getting better. You can start defining what your dependencies are. So we start seeing 4 major areas that I believe that we're going to address with this. Total cost of ownership. When you're looking at TCO, how do you reduce costs? And maybe it's your infrastructure bill is going to go down. Maybe it's just because you're getting your team being more efficient on bringing them on. Maybe it's because of the flow that you're doing to your ops team. All of this faster delivery kind of driving down how much it costs for you to do development. You also get a lot of things like, what requirements do I have for this particular version? I'm on 10.1, but I'm on 10.0 on this project. Oh, 10.2, like 9.3, right? Having those dependencies of what Solr version do you need? What SQL Server version do you need? Being able to define that for your team, share that, have everybody just get up and running, makes things a lot easier. You tear down, you go to your next project, you build up. It's going to make a lot of efficiencies there for the dev teams working. I also think we're going to see on the ops side a little bit of a change. In adopting Kubernetes, people are forced into doing a bit of a delivery mindset change to continuous delivery. But there's also all these new tools of monitoring and security that have become industry standard out there that monitor containers that you can use for applying security. And we can take advantage of that now, because now we're going to be able to be in that ecosystem. Now, ultimately, I think if you want to go to a continuous delivery model, it's not a tech problem. Going to containers is not going to solve that. It's a people problem. It's a DevOps is a culture issue, right? You got to get people wanting to work together, bringing the whole life cycle. But when we start adopting Docker in our development areas and then going to Kubernetes for our infrastructure automation, we're going to be seeing a lot of the workflow changing in organizations because the tools have been designed for working that way. So you're going to have to be thinking that way, and it's going to help those teams that are trying to transition into that model. So I think this is pretty huge. Now, the other thing is we've got not just containers as a new option, but this whole headless delivery piece, right? So we can start building an ASP.NET Core on the front end now. So that means that you're going to have teams doing a headless architecture, getting all that great feedback we had about JSS, and be able to now go and do a lightweight front end, which means you're going to be faster when you start building. So you can debug locally, you can make your changes locally, and not worry about recycling Sitecore all the time, right? You're just consuming, trying to work on your front end, build it out really fast. This is going to help with the team morale as well, either attracting people or just retaining people who want to stop working on an older ASP.NET and work on .NET Core. They're going to find something new that they can play around with, get excited about. A lot of teams also have started building other ASP.NET Core applications. Because of its headless approach, you can actually pull Sitecore in a more, when you want it type of approach, which allows a little bit better native integration into those ASP.NET Core applications. We're going to see that starting to pop up a little bit more too. Now, if I start combining this, so I'm a developer and I want to set up a development setup using containers and I want to work headless, it gets a lot easier to start creating these scale developer setups. I don't have to worry about it as much of like, how am I going to keep all these pieces working together? We can define those Docker files, compose it up, bring it up, and you get all of the basics things that you need for Sitecore. The one I'm showing here is an architecture for a simple XM type of build. This is what we're doing to build out the MVP site right now. And then we add in our headless layer. And this is where we're going to be doing all of our changes when we're building out our website. We're changing our ASP.NET Core front end, and we don't have to worry about all that Sitecore pieces behind it. We're just connecting to it. So this is letting us do really rapid recycles as we make changes. Another new piece that's in the architecture with Sitecore 10 that you're going to see out of the box with what we define is traffic as a reverse proxy. Some of you may have played around with it and noticed, IIS is acting weird and you can't get your containers up and you got to turn it off to make it work. That's because it's intercepting that traffic and trying to reroute over to where it should go, and IIS does, is intercepting on the same ports. But traffic is there and allows you to then work on your multiple projects, be able to know which containers need to be responded to. Makes things a little bit for you. If we switch over to the serialization side of things for devs, what we're going to be looking at here is really, well, we've been calling it, the best of TDS and Unicorn, right? So it's focusing in on the content piece. So there's things that TDS does, and there's going to be some things that Unicorn does that are outside of that story. But for your ability to automate content, serialize content, share it with your teams, push it through environments, we get these two new options. And the first one being a command line interface. A lot of devs want to work at the command line. I'm not one of them, but when you do want to work on the command line, you want a tool that does that. And then also you've got Sitecore for Visual Studio for those who would rather work in their IDE, have a more graphical user interface for it. And the key here is they both do the same thing. They're built on top of each other. So that means within a team or even within the same developer, you can choose, I'm going to work on the CLI now, or I'm going to be in my IDE, work where you happen to be. So I may not want to use the CLI, although I'll admit, ever since I've started using it, I did get a little hooked on doing my pushes and publishing via the CLI. It seemed a little bit faster. So you can pick how you want to work at different times. And I think that's a big bonus for it. Now, one of the things that we don't highlight a lot, but there was a bunch of stuff that happened from a performance and monitoring perspective in this build. Whether it's around the change tracking in XDB and just making that work way faster, or having reporting that's working with being able to use lazy loading and caching and let you have tens of thousands of active personalizations and not seeing degradation, to things like the session state stuff. When we worked on the session state reduction here as a team, they were able to really reduce and optimize the response time there. So all of these things are allowing you to either use less infrastructure for the same thing or be able to solve problems faster. Again, addressing that whole lower cost of the total cost of ownership, right? One of the ones that I thought was neat was the application map. So a lot of teams out there in using Azure wanted to use the application map to monitor their XConnect services and things like that. And with this, now we can finally do that. So I thought that was pretty cool from an ops perspective. Now, with a few minutes I got left, I want to just quickly run through some of the marketing features as well and content features. There's a lot that was done for technical delivery, but there are some features there too for the marketing teams. A lot of it focusing on how do we go faster to make changes? How does the team have more in the tools they're trying to use? So that meant making Horizon better, handle more use cases, whether it's multiple languages or being able to work on metadata, and also doing things like new rules and more layouts and working with Salesforce Marketing Cloud, that type of thing. How do we use the tools that we already have? And data privacy was another piece. A lot of folks saw in Sitecore 9, we had GDPR coming around the same time as 9.0, and we got a lot of tooling in there to really address a lot of regulations. But we're seeing that there's more and more that we can do. And in 10, we addressed some of this with forms and some of this also with consent management. We'll dive into those a little bit later. Now, the first one, which I thought was a pretty big win, is going back to the old personalization on a CMS only install, because this allows you to run a very, very lightweight infrastructure, still getting a little bit of personalization capability for people using whether it's session rules or device rules. So this is going to let teams start the personalization journey a little bit earlier before they invest in having XDB and XConnect and all the marketing automation, having all of that running too. So this is going to make it a little easier to get started into that world. Another piece I mentioned was Horizon. Now, multilingual, multi-site was huge, being able to support that use case and get that going, including being able to switch over to an SXA site. Now, SXA does have a lot more integration in this version, but I think we're going to see over the course of the Sitecore 10 series a lot more. We're still having some scenarios of SXA that aren't fully supported in Horizon. So I think as we go through the 10 series, we're going to start seeing SXA and Horizon really tightly coupled and being able to be fully used for those scenarios. And part of getting there was, how do we edit page metadata, this headless data, things like that. So being able to switch over to this kind of content view instead of the WYSIWYG view. So that was a really big change, and we've added some of the content can now be edited that way. And that's going to allow for more use cases where editors can kind of stay in Horizon and not have to like switch over to Content Editor or switch over to Experience Editor. And finally, we're talking Content Hub. We got to get that DAM in there. Before, with Horizon, you had the media library stuff you could pick. We needed to be able to get people who were invested, letting the marketing team have a little bit better flow. Again, staying within the tool they want to use. Now, on the Content Hub front, we're seeing people who want to model their content over in CMP, and they want that then to go out across all their channels. And then in that world, XP is just one of many channels. The web channel's out there, but then they've got all kinds of other channels that they're trying to push to, whether it's print or email or some other tool that they're integrating with. So we needed to start defining more. There was a little bit of support in there, and we had to add more fields. Taxonomy was a big piece. And this is something we're going to keep investing in, because we want to see that story where you can use, as a marketing team, Content Hub as your central repository, start the creation workflow, getting everything defined, figuring out what that content is, and then letting each team then take it the rest of the way. So it gets into XP and the web team can take it to what it needs to be for the website or for the apps or whatever it is that XP is then driving. I mentioned privacy quickly on this. Lots of stuff like GDPR, the new California privacy regulations. There's a whole bunch that's coming out here. Right to be forgotten. We had this in 9 with our XConnect stuff, and there was a way to get rid of forms data, but it wasn't as easy as it could be. So there's new APIs now available, so you can get things like redacting your submission values, deleting files that were uploaded by the visitor, XDB contacts, getting those associations removed. So then the marketing team still sees the reporting data, but it becomes anonymized. So I think that was a nice thing that was added on there. The other piece was consent management, which we've all seen all those pop-ups of like, please accept the cookies on this site so that you can get functionality, right? Everybody's kind of rolling their own on how to do that. From Sitecore side, we're like, how can we support this better, give a better infrastructure for it? So doing things like the ability to store the consent in XDB out of the box, having those there, and have sites be able to disable the tracker if those are not set for a user. So if a user has not consented, the site automatically can deactivate the tracker. And also making that site specific. So you can have some sites that operate one way, another site that operates and immediately deactivates based on consent. So this is going to get the teams to be able to have a better start to getting to the point that they need to be for whatever privacy regulations they're trying to meet. And one final piece that I want to talk to is about Sitecore marketing automation. We've seen a lot of groups that are using Salesforce marketing automation, and we had this integration which kind of did like a batch connect over to it, and teams were finding they didn't have the real-time capability they needed. So we added a new marketing automation feature in Sitecore, which allows you to do real-time integration right into Journey Builder. So something happens on the Sitecore side, your marketing automation plan picks that up and is configured with that action to go and immediately put that person over into a Journey Builder, pass the data over, allowing whoever's using Salesforce marketing automation to then respond in real time across all the channels they're using there. So it's a nice little use case that we can solve for teams that are kind of trying to make these tools work together. So that was a whirlwind, going through all that real quick, high level. But at this point, I'd really like to find out, what kind of questions do folks have? What do people want to know? And how can we help? So I think at this point, I don't see any raised hands, but Anders, do you want to run the moderation on this?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I don't see any raised hands either. Anyone has?
Kurt? I think raised.
I've got a small question related to the Horizon interface, because we've seen now indeed that you can edit fields, and if you do it that way, you get a full-blown rich text editor, what you actually would expect. But in the WYSIWYG mode, you don't. And it's even impossible to just put a simple link to another page in your site in that editor, which makes it completely useless. So is there, well, maybe in a next update or something, will we get a full rich text editor in the WYSIWYG mode?
I don't know if it's in the next version, but what I am doing is taking down the note here so I can follow up with the product team and note that's definitely, that seems like it's misaligned, right? If you have one editing interface on the back content editing view and then a different one when you're WYSIWYG, there may be reasons for that from a user experience perspective that they're trying to go that way. But you should be able to accomplish the same thing, however it's provided, right? Whether it's a rich text editor or they just allow you to somehow copy paste in markup and it just does it for you. So I'll take that back to the product team and follow up, see what we can get done about that.
Okay, thanks.
So anyone else have questions for Jason?
Or critiques if you don't have questions. I'm cool with taking feedback too back to the team. So
well, I have one question. I've raised my hand for Jason. Well, Jason, what about the media library? The media library is well, we started off with the Sitecore 4 back in the 2000s. And the media library hasn't changed a lot. And now we have responsive websites, and we need to have pictures to adopt both the mobile experience and the desktop experience. So, what is your take on the media library?
I think my personal take on the media library right now is the media library is indeed, as you said, Kurt, under innovated within what comes out of the box in Sitecore. I think we've been doing a lot of innovation on that, especially through our acquisition of Style Labs, bringing in the Content Hub tool, the DAM features that are in there, the CMP workflow. If you're looking for where Sitecore is investing in media and media management, it's over there. I mean, there's you've got AI looking at that for content similarity, proper search stuff, you've got proper tagging. If you look at that tool, that is where we are investing for media. We think that is where we're going to go, and we are building on that model going forward. So I don't know what's going to happen completely down the road. It's too far to see. But right now, we do know that we have XP going one way, and then we've got the new path to SaaS going in a different way. And while we're innovating on both, I think it makes sense for us to, if we're going to invest in media management, to invest in the tool that does the media management for us. So I think for teams who are looking for that advanced media capabilities, they should be looking at what we have from Content Hub. So we're doing more and more integration where you can use that within XP directly. So you, instead of picking from the media library, you pick from your DAM. And then you can get a lot more functionality that way. So yeah, and this question seems familiar, Kurt. Did you ask me this on Twitter as well?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. And I thought your name looked familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So DAM is really the way to go. And there's a bunch of functionality in there. I really suggest taking a look at it and seeing how it can help you out from a media management perspective. And I think, if I'm not correct, I think Akshay is talking about Content Hub integration later today on this one, right?
Yes, he is.
That'd be a really cool session for you to see what's going on there, Kurt.
Yeah, but I don't think that Sitecore will offer me a damn light solution out of the box. I think I should pay for it. And if you look from it from both a user perspective and other perspective, then we might have a solution that doesn't fit the new area of CMSs. So just a head up on that.
Yeah, I'm not in the sales team, so I don't know how all that licensing is gonna work out with having whether teams that have certain licenses can get into Content Hub and how that works and whether they have the light versions or not. That obviously for you and your sales group to talk about what would work for you in that scenario. But I do know that at least from a tech perspective, that's the direction to go if that's the problem you want to solve. Okay, I see another raised hand, right, Anders?
Sumit?
No, I just wanted to add on to you, Jason, that we had done some bits in XXA. So within the last few releases, XXA compliant components are responsive, and it has its own ways of handling those requests. I just pasted that on the chat.
Oh yeah, the responsive variants, right? Yeah. I think that doesn't solve the, if I recall, that doesn't solve the media management part of it, right?
Yeah, it just solves the responsiveness. Where do you want to see that?
Yeah. So yeah. Well, thank you, Jason. We are actually out of time already. It goes much quicker than, but yeah, highly appreciated that you could come by and.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome anytime. Next time, maybe in person. Who knows? That would be great if.
Pandemic willing.
Yeah, exactly. Well. Is it just me who can't? I can't stop myself laughing when you said "damn tool." It might just be me who.
I think Chris Williams has been getting in my head too much.
Well, anyway, I'm just looking. Teams swapped all the controls around, so I never get used to this. I will just take over here if I can do it. Whoops. So, yeah, I can't. Well, here we go. So, up next is Volodymyr from Pencil. He will very relevant to Sitecore 10 talk about content serialization in Sitecore 10. And since we are already a bit over time, I guess just take it away.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I will try to share my screen. Yeah, do you see it?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Volodymyr. I'm a solution architect at Pinto, and I have been Sitecore MVP for the last 4 years. And today I will continue the talk from Jason, and we'll speak about Sitecore Content Serialization, which came in Sitecore 10 release. This talk will be quite technical, and just let me know if I sound too boring. Just stop me. And this is the agenda, what we're going to talk about. We will just see what Sitecore have made and called the Sitecore Content Serialization. We will see those two tools, Sitecore CLI and Sitecore for Visual Studio. I have been playing a little bit and I compared both Sitecore Content Serialization and Unicorn. We will see some comparison of those. We will also look at how to generate our lovely code using native Sitecore content serialization this time. Before we start, let's just have a look on how this serialization path has been evolving in Sitecore releases. So at start, we had .item format, which worked, and then the TDS appeared, which was the third-party tool paid with it was modeled for the actually plugin for the Visual Studio, and it worked with .item format. We were happy. However, the .item format showed to be not very good in terms of storing it under the source control, meaning that every time we had the merge conflict, it was a pain. Next, we had the third-party open source tool Unicorn, which brought a YAML serialization format. And the YAML serialization format is human readable. In addition, source control friendly format, meaning that it can be merged automatically by the Git, for example. And since the Habitat and Helix principles were introduced, this combination of Unicorn and YAML was our favorite in this industry. And so Sitecore probably noticed that. And in release number 10, they combined TDS, Unicorn, and YAML and came up with something native called Sitecore Content Serialization. Let's just get started with it and see what it is. And the Sitecore Content Serialization brings us new ways of configurations. It does support modular architecture, and all the configs are in the JSON now. And to get started, we need to have a solution or project configuration file, and then as many as we like module configuration files. Let's try and get started with it. So the project configuration file most likely should be placed in the root of our solution or kind of root of our solution, and it's called sitecore.json, and it contains next information, next data. It refers to the schema, which is installed with the CLI tool. We need to define the pattern to how our serialization engine finds all the modules which should be included into the serialization. And we have some properties. If we have a look at the first property, it says default max relative item path length. And to me, it is very similar to what we had in Unicorn. And it's indeed like that because these approaches of Sitecore content serialization were adapted from Unicorn as I see it, and we will see it later. Okay, let's see how the module JSON looks like. And it's containing the namespace, which is our identifier for the model. We can provide references or dependencies, I would say. So my feature module depends on all the foundations, and it supports wildcards and it's array, so we can depend on many things. Just remember not to create circular dependencies. And then we have items node and multiple includes. And includes also look familiar to us from the Unicorn. We define the alias, which is name, and the path. Yeah, let's just get deeper how we configure our serialization. First, we need to remember is that the order of our includes are important. For example, if we include into serialization some content items which are based on templates which we include afterwards, this will not work. Instead, we need to keep the order so it can be deserialized normally, which sounds logical to us, no problem for that. Let's take a look at the include node. And there are two required properties to it, name and path, but there are 4 more properties. 4 more properties which are optional and have default values. So we can add a scope, which would be defining what tree should be serialized. It could be single item, it could be item and children, etc. Database is obvious. Max relative path length will probably override the default value from the project file. And then we have one interesting option, which is pretty new, allowed push operations. This means that we can control what happens to the items when they are getting deserialized back to Sitecore instance. And with option create only, for example, we can have a node with content where we deserialize it to Sitecore. It will create only newly created items, but will not touch the existing content. Yeah, something new to me, at least. In addition, well, this doesn't look sufficient, and Sitecore has invented a little more. To each include object, we can add a rules object. And in this example that we see, the content includes the content home node, but it does not include the products legacy, which is paths of the rules are relative to the parent path. So home/products/legacy will be ignored. Then all the products, the rest of the products will be included. And then the last rule says that please ignore everything else. So this include will actually include only required products. And yeah, again, the table, which I basically copied from the Sitecore documentation website. Table shows the options. And in, for example, scope, we see the new option, which is ignored. And we can create aliases for the shorter lengths of file system serialized files, I believe. Okay, now we have seen how we can configure it, how we can make it run, how we can make it work. And this slide will basically duplicate what Jason just showed. So Sitecore Content Serialization is the functionality which is driven by Sitecore CLI, is a new tool being distributed in Sitecore NuGet feed as a netcore.net tool, or we can use Sitecore for Visual Studio plugin. Let's get started with Sitecore CLI. So it is a headless tool. It's on NetCore, and it just install it to any of your project folders, and it is actually recommended to install it per project to keep track on the versioning of the tool. But it also can be installed globally. It leaves us options, first of all for serialization, but also a few more, for example, publishing, and we can do the login to the Sitecore instance or multiple Sitecore instances. Yeah, and it gives us options with CI/CD delivery. And during the preparing myself to this presentation, I was happily surprised, and it actually was the unknown feeling when I opened the Sitecore documentation website. I read it, I do what it says, and everything just works. So I give a credit to Sitecore for that. Let's see some demo. Yes. So I have, can you see my CLI? Yeah, I think you can. Let's create a new folder, CLI test, CLI test. So this is the new folder I created, and I will install the Sitecore CLI into this folder. I will start from creating a new .NET 2 manifest, which is something default from the .NET. If I say here, now I can see there is a folder is named config. Now I can install the tool, and I need to refer to the Sitecore NuGet feed to make it work. So now it's installed, and I can say .NET Sitecore help. Yeah, I can see my available commands. First would be login. I can publish. I can do some serialization commands, but we will start with init. So I do init. And now in my folder, I can see there is something new. It's called .sitecore, which the folder where the CLI would store all the metadata and schemas. Also, I can see my project file for the serialization, which is Sitecore JSON. And it looks by default like this. And Sitecore wants us to configure specifically our path or pattern to our models, which is fine. Okay. Now, one of the commands .NET Sitecore help would be login. And to login, I need to pass some parameters to Sitecore. I say .NET Sitecore login. I pass the authority, which would be my identity server URL. And then it needs to know my content management URL. And this will be interactive login, which just redirects me to my website to login. So I can say, OK, and yes, allow. And then I'm back to my CLI, and it says my login was successful. And now the CLI can access my Sitecore instance. All right, if I go back to help, let's say I can do Sitecore publish. And it will perform the full website publish. We have seen the login, which is interactive login. There is a documentation how to set up and configure non-interactive login, which would help us with the continuous delivery scenarios. And it's all well documented on Sitecore documentation. All right, this was the test. And now I will get to some project I have created. So here I have my new empty Sitecore 10. And I have Visual Studio project, which has all my serialization models. And I will get in CLI to that project. Right, .NET Sitecore share. Let's see what I can do with the serialization command. The main two commands will be pull and push, which respectively get content from Sitecore and serialize it to disk, and backwards push would be deserialized to Sitecore instance. What we also can do is to get some info and it will list us all the configured models that we have in our project. And let's say I have something in my solution that should be serialized. So I will perform the push operation. And it did find something and created me a new bunch of templates. Well, actually one template. And if I say I add one field, I save it, and I do the pull. Then it should recognize there is a change in Sitecore, which is not on the disk, and it did find it. If I do it again, it should say there are no changes. This is how it works, basically. We have a nice CLI, which is, again, very similar to Unicorn. I will get back to my slides. Right. So from what we saw, it's all very similar to Unicorn. And what if we just try and compare to new Sitecore content serialization with Unicorn? And as a developer, my development life would look like next. And I compare it both Unicorn and Sitecore content serialization. So to get started, I would develop my templates, renderings, etc., all the developer-controlled items, and it doesn't change in a new way. With Unicorn, we would serialize our items to source control, and normally it happens automatically because Unicorn has event handlers for item saves. But in new way, in the Sitecore content serialization, we need to perform the pull command. So we go to CLI and say pull. So then when I'm done with my feature, I need to get latest and sync all the things with Unicorn if I'm on the Unicorn. So I get all the latest changes to my local. But in the new way, in the Sitecore content serialization, I need to perform similar command which called push. We just saw it. And then I just keep working. I commit my push, commit and push my changes to the source control, and everybody's happy. So the developer flow is not that different, to be honest, and it can be just replaced. Let's see another thing. I have been playing a little bit, and I compared. I took, for example, this simple template, which contains 3 fields and the standard values, and I serialized it both with Unicorn and Sitecore content serialization. And I tried to compare how it looks like. Is it different at all? So first difference in the root, we will see the new SC index file, which is just index, I guess, for performance reasons, for the SCS to work faster. But this index file can be removed, so it will be created automatically again. So if we go inside navigation folder, we have same. If we go inside data folder, we have same, inside, same, and same again. So the content tree, actually the file system tree, is the same in both Unicorn and content serialization. And what if I take the same serialized file and we see some difference? In Unicorn, they do serialize a database name for the file, which now it sounds to me as redundant, actually. And from the other side, Sitecore content serialization adds 3 more fields, which is also fine. This actually makes me think, all this comparison, that the migration project, for example, if we want to change from Unicorn to Sitecore content serialization, won't be that much of a task. With a few magic PowerShell scripts, it can be done. So that's my conclusion from it. All right. What is the most benefit for me as for developer doing the content serialization is the ability to generate my wrapper classes or mapper classes for the ORMs. And there are still ways. So we can keep using the T4, old good T4 templates. And with the new way, we will have dependency only to Sitecore kernel. However, it needs a little bit of tweaking, and I will show it. in a few moments. But the key feature is that we will be using native Sitecore code for deserializing our YAML files. Or we can use the third-party tool, Librechon. I think you might have known already Librechon. It was written by Ben Lipson, and I have been in contact with Ben. I need to give him a good credit. It works with the new CLI, and he also wrote the CLI for Librechon, and we will see it today. So basically, this is the tool that utilizes Roslyn compiler, and it works much faster than T4 templates, and it can be automated with Librechon CLI. It's also headless. It's very CD friendly. Yeah, I believe there could be a third way to generate our code, which is utilizing the Sitecore CLI capabilities, not the Sitecore kernel, but I didn't go that way. Anyway, let's see some demo again. So I have my solution, and I will just jump to another solution to get deserialized YAML file of Sitecore item. We need to instantiate the YAML item serializer, which is in the Sitecore kernel version 10. This class depends on field formatters factory, well, some object, which also depends on base factory, which is the Sitecore configuration factory behind. So basically, we need to mock all these dependencies to make it work headless, without outside of context of the Sitecore instance. And this is what I did. I created my own field formatters factory, which inherits the one. And I passed the mocked configuration factory, which just throws all the not implemented exceptions. But the reason for it is that these formatters should be read from the Sitecore config. And now I will be just passing it manually. So this is the principle how I made to work the T4 format. And I just baked in the T4 file all these mocked classes. It's somewhere in here, yeah. So it's the same. And if we see at the top, I have a dependency only to Sitecore kernel, which is native, and it's beautiful. And I do generate my code for the framework called Xwrap. It's something that I'm maintaining. Yeah, if I just delete it and say run custom tool, it will generate me back my templates. I hope so. Yeah, it's here. Right, so that's all good T4 templates. Let's see how the Librechon tool works, but maybe not just right now. I need to revert some changes or commit. Okay, so I get my solution reloaded. So the Librechon, to install it, I need to run just .NET to install Librechon CLI, and it gets the same way installed as a Sitecore CLI. And in my config, which is .NET tools, I will see two tools, Sitecore and the Librechon. Right, so this I can close. To make it work, first I need to, well, the Librechon has excessive documentation on its own on GitHub, thanks to Ben Lipson again. And here, to make it work, I will start from Librechon config, which has adapted version for Sitecore content serialization, and we need to provide our modules pattern in the root. And then in each module, we would need to add something for Librechon. And it works from the command line as well. So if I say .NET librejon and pass the config, it will just regenerate me the code. Also, this is very simple to integrate to gulp tasks, for example, so I can run my code generation from gulp and get basically same result. Yeah, if you're interested, you should read about librejon, but the point is it does support the new way of Sitecore serialization. Yeah, let's get to my slides. So, do you remember this slide? And I have a question. Where is TDS in all this story? And it is actually there. It came as a Sitecore for Visual Studio plugin. And this is the tool which I didn't install and I will not demo really, but it does utilize the Sitecore CLI capabilities. It provides the UI for it. It provides the UI for doing all the configurations in your Visual Studio. And it provides some options for watch and automatic serialization. Since I didn't install, I will just show some screenshots from documentation website. So this is how you can configure the sitecore.json file. Basically same. We can see all the modules installed, and we can also change them here. We can see all the includes of each model and all the rules, so we can edit everything. All the configuration can be edited from the Visual Studio. Also, there is something called environments. We can keep, for example, our test, production, dev, whatever environments in our configs. And as a true TDS product, we will run some diff and see pretty detailed difference of what we have in Sitecore and what we have on disk, including all the fields. This is what it does, and yeah, I just didn't try to install it. I'm happy with console. All right, so as a conclusion, can we actually just start using Sitecore content serialization and stop using Unicorn, for example? My answer would be yes, but Sitecore content serialization cannot work with users and roles so far. And I asked Nick Wasserman. He says that it's in pipeline. So next release, we will see the options for users and roles. So yeah, we should actually get started on that. Another question, as I told before, I see no problems to migrate from Unicorn to Sitecore content serialization. It will require some scripting probably, but it's possible. And on this happy note, I will be finishing. If you have any questions, please ask. This is how you can find me on all the community, Twitter, and Stack Exchange. And here I have some links. All the code we saw today is on my GitHub. Also links to librejon and xwrap, and the link to Sitecore documentation. Yep.
So, thank you. Right on time. Any questions from anyone?
I said I was too boring.
No, no one. You were definitely not boring. Oh,
I maybe have one question.
Yeah.
Did you compare the speed of serialization and deserialization between Unicorn and the Sitecore version?
No, not really. I didn't run it on some real project, only some test. So I cannot tell about the speed, but it seems that the Sitecore serialization is adoption of Unicorn into the product. So I would expect something very similar, to be honest.
Okay.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So you just answered my question, which was if you had been using it on any real solutions yet.
No, not yet.
That might be a question to the audience then, if it has anyone used or tried to use it as part of a Sitecore 10 upgrade. Not yet. That would be...
Yeah, it's too early.
Yeah, it's too early. Next time, next meetup. Yeah. Well, thank you. Next up is Artsem, but we just have a 5 minutes break. Right.
Okay, then thank everyone. I will mute.
Thank you. So is anyone still here?
I am.
Yes.
Hey, yay, hey.
Too scared to unmute.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone is muted, complete silence. This is usually the time where people talk during the breaks. Not that I have anything to say. No one?
Not enough beer, I guess.
No. Well.
There are some activities going around in the chat. Maybe you can answer that, Anders.
If Sitecore with a capital C.
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
That's the one.
Yeah, well, don't want to get into that.
Rasmus, you did a talk on JSS recently. I think.
Yeah, I did that. Actually,
is it recorded or something somewhere?
Tuesday. Yeah, it is recorded, and I have the slide as well if you want.
Just throw me the recording. I just want to skim through. You guys are doing.
It was based on one of our customers that we just launched back in August, and how we did the JSS implementation, and how we utilized storybooks, etc., dummy data for helping speeding up the process. So normally we have some bottlenecks between the front end and back end developers regarding data when we are using JSS implementation. So we it was just to talk about around that.
Yeah, that whole what do you call the push from both ends, isn't it? Like front end, back end.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we didn't run a disconnected mode, and we didn't run a connected mode. So we simply just put in a dummy data layer, and then we specified a contract between the backend and front end developers. So whoever started building a component could create the dummy data, and then we used TypeScript, etc., to define the different fields from Sitecore. So we didn't need to create item resolvers for each component, etc. So
yeah, I think yes. Yeah, send me the link. I'll just.
Yeah, sure. So.
Yeah, I would like to watch that as well. If you.
Yeah, sure. I can do a presentation perhaps next time around that part, if needed.
Yeah.
It's only a half an hour talk, so.
Oh yeah, Rasmus. Maybe do we have another? Yeah, we don't have anything in.
Yeah, we
fixed in the schedule. We do, but we
do that. But I haven't found any speakers yet, so I don't think that I would love to announce the date right now because we might have to postpone it. But we have one coming up in the beginning of November or in October.
Oh, which is in a few weeks' time. Okay.
Yeah, but I guess we have to see the pandemic situation as well, if it should be online again. Which also makes it easier to find speakers.
It's less. You don't have to compare. You don't have to prepare so much because you can follow your script. And yeah.
So my family just entered the room. I'll just mute myself. Good to talk to you.
So we are also 3 more minutes if we want to keep with the schedule. Artsem, are you with us? Uh-oh.
If you are, you might be muted.
Yeah.
I saw him chatting.
Yeah.
And he's offline.
Yeah, he's here. He might just spend. Yeah, there's 2 more minutes, so no pressure.
So Anders, if you have some nice lounge music, you could
Yeah.
on right now, so it's not so costly.
I didn't prepare any lounge music. Next time. Oh, what's happening to my camera now? I'm being all distorted. Focus like that. Oh, yeah. I could play around here with the camera. So here, wow.
That's a good one.
I like the Bond theme section. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, not that I want to get into politics. Just sitting here by my table, hanging out.
It has done a very good perspective, though. It has thrown you all the way to the end, and like, you know.
Yeah, I can. I can resize me. I'm using OBS.
Oh.
And then outputting OBS to a fake camera that I'm using in Teams. So I can insert anything. I could insert a video in the background.
That looks so good.
It's like TV weather. Yeah. I have a real green screen thing behind me.
You're okay. You have a green screen behind you then.
Well, Artsem?
Yes, I'm here.
Ah, perfect. I was just getting nervous that we had lost you. But perfect. Well, it's time. How far can you want to show us how far you can go with the Sitecore GSS? Yeah. Okay. Maybe can you turn up your mic just a little bit? Maybe. Might just be.
Is it fine now?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
I'll leave it up to you then, and yeah.
Do you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, then we can start. Good evening, everybody. Actually, my name is Artsem Prashkovic, and I'm going to start with a short introduction of myself. Actually, I have more than 10 years programming experience. Since April 2012, I work for Brimit. I have more than 8 years experience in Sitecore, and I'm Sitecore Technology MVP Science 2018, and currently I'm located in Minsk, Belarus. And there are opinions that GSS is mostly used for simple websites or single-page applications. Today, I will share how our team uses GSS, React Command Uniform for creating a website with millions of users for tourism agency. First of all, a disclaimer: as long as our customer is a national tourism organization, so we have an NDA, and it doesn't allow us to share the customer name and some project details. The second one, I'm not a front-end developer, and I'm not a React developer, and probably I will not be able to answer a specific front-end related questions, but I can try at least. GSS was announced a few years ago, and I think many of us know what is it and how it looks like. But anyway, I will say a few general words about it. GSS or JavaScript services is a toolkit for JavaScript developers, allowing to build full-fledged customer solutions like single-page applications, web apps, websites, using modern JavaScript libraries and frameworks, React or Angular, and be completely unplugged from Sitecore. As we can see on the diagram, GSS is based on such services as layout, content, dictionary services. There is also import service, and I separated it because it doesn't take part in rendering process. In case using code first approach, this service is used for deploying changes to Sitecore. We also can see config file where GSS app is defined in Sitecore. There are also a Node.js server and Node.js view engine, which are used for rendering components based on the data, which is provided by layout service. The view engine is used when rendering is performed on Sitecore side rather than on Node.js server side. But take into account that in both cases, the data come from layout service, data for rendering. Okay. As we know, Sitecore 10 was released not so long ago. There are not many new GSS features with this release. The changes are mostly related to improved stability and support for new platform features. The image represents Sitecore 10 architecture. We can still see the same services as layout service, dictionary, import service, and GraphQL. Sitecore connected all these services in separate module called Sitecore headless services. And this module, previously known as Sitecore JavaScript Services Server, provides the server-side APIs and components which are required for ASP.NET Core Rendering SDK, the new one, and for JavaScript Rendering SDK, previously JSS. Now is the time to switch to the main point of presentation, sharing my experience of using GSS on a real project which is currently in production. A few words about our client. The customer had a platform built using Sitecore 7 and was looking to build a new one using Sitecore 9, while Sitecore is used as a headless CMS. It was also planned to integrate the new platform with selected marketing technologies in their digital experience platform. The scope of the project includes migrating content, keeping the existing custom integrations and extensions from the old platform. The new platform includes 4 sites with separate sitemaps under the separate domains. Each site will have new design following the modular approach. One of the requirements of the project of the project is a time to interactive should be less than 1 second. The TTI metric measures the time a page takes before the user can interact with it, or in other words, how long before browser responds to the click. Almost all architectural decisions are made around this requirement. I will call it the main requirement during the presentation. Now I want to say about our architecture, server infrastructure, and first of all, I want to say that all our deployments is automated. We use the Azure DevOps for make our deployments, and the actual server architecture consists of 3 groups: QA, UAT, and production. Currently on the screen, we can see our QA environment. Here, 2 CM servers and load balancer between them. We have 2 CM servers because we load 1 CM server with some scheduled tasks like integration. We have some integrations that require some loading time, and another case is to make it high availability, to keep high availability for CM servers as well. Then we have 2 publishing servers. We found out one interesting thing, that the publishing service is scaling up automatically. They both use the same publishing queue and process the items from the queue together. Also, we have a backend identity server, which represents the default Sitecore identity server, which goes with out of the box. And we have the Solar search server, which is connected to CM server only. We don't use the Solar on our delivery servers at all. We have Azure directory connected to the CM server as well. Now we can see our UAT environment. It is pretty the same with the QA, but here we have green content delivery server and blue. We utilize the blue-green deployments for UAT and for production environments, and there is 2 groups, and then this is only one difference between our QA and UAT environments. And finally, it is our production environment. The CM content management group is pretty the same for all of this, for all of us environments, and here we can see that we have 2 groups of CD servers. We have green group and blue group, and load balancer between them, but this one load balancer is not really it's not really original load balancer. It is I will say a bit more about this load balancer, but actually this load balancer is represented by Akamai. I was thinking a lot of what to show on this slide, but our backend part is pretty much conventional and Helix-based solution. Integrations, helpers, basic stuff for features represent the foundational layer as usual. Each module in Sitecore represents a feature in solution. A feature always includes a unicorn configuration. It also can optionally have rendering content resolver if component requires a custom one, configs, and other Sitecore related code for preparing data for the view. I will add more details about most global issues and how we solve them a bit later. Before switching to the front-end solution architecture, I want to go through the definition of code first and Sitecore first approaches. as you probably already know, Sitecore JavaScript services has two approaches to work with. It is code first and Sitecore first. And in case of using the code first approach, front-end developers work disconnected from Sitecore and define Sitecore structure via in-code components definitions and root data. Sitecore information architecture is generated via the import process, and this approach is recommended for smaller projects or temporary sites like campaigns. Front-end led projects or micro apps within the large site. And in case of using Sitecore first approach, Sitecore information architecture are created by Sitecore developers, no import process utilized. Front-end developers works disconnected from Sitecore and creates components and mock root data based on the contract provided by Sitecore developers. Contract can be defined first to allow concurrent work, and this approach is recommended for complex projects and organizations which looking for full control over Sitecore information architecture. Our project is complex. We are definitely looking for full control over the Sitecore information architecture, and so Sitecore first approach is an obvious choice in our case. Now the time is speak about Sitecore information architecture, and utilizing a Sitecore first approach, we have a full control across Sitecore information architecture. It allows us to have a content structure we want, any number of page templates with a preset presentation on standard values, branches with default data sources. From the Sitecore perspective, it looks pretty standard, and nothing says that it is a headless solution. Our Sitecore solution represents a multi-site solution and multi-language. Actually, we have 4 sites here. We can see that we have a lot of different page types. So everything looks like standard Sitecore solution. We also built our Sitecore solution based on the Helix principles, and each site is a project. Module which can contain more than one component or rendering is the feature layer, and base templates, data models, integrations, workflows, global settings is a foundations layer. Only one thing which is different from standard Sitecore application is all renderings utilized, created based on the JSON renderings template. One more thing, that we have the global data where we have articles, events, itineraries, POIs. So this kind of data is some main data on our project. The items under these folders represent the pages. It is item with presentation setup, and these items can be reused on probably almost each site. Come on. React solution architecture. We built a slightly different React solution compared to a standard GSS. We did it because we have 4 different websites. Some of them have a different layout. We implemented about 150 components. At least half of them are shared and used for each website. The rest of them are website specific. To avoid any component duplication, we separated component implementation and the GSS apps. Eventually, we have UI components React project, which contains all components, implementation for all components. We have site 1 GSS app or React, it's React project. separate. It is very similar to the original GSS React app, but has only one difference. It doesn't have a component implementation. Components are included to the app as an NPM dependency. And we have the shared project, which is common for site 1, or sorry, for site 2, site 3, and site 4 on the previous diagram. UI components project has two build commands. One for shared GSS app. The difference is in number of components that will be included into the package. Each of them includes only the components that are required for the specific site. After the build is complete, the code is pushed to the private Azure NPM repository. Then when we build the shared app, it downloads the corresponding package from the repository with the package with components. This is really helpful because we have to take care of each byte of assets to meet our main requirement again. So when we will prepare artifacts for the shared GSS app, it will include the stuff in orange area. When we will deploy or build the site 1, it will include shared components and components which is related only for the site 1. We have shared GSS app because 3 of our sites has the same layout and they just use the same components, just each site has different color theme. So the next thing that I want to say is Content Delivery Network, or CDN. In our case, we use Akamai, and Akamai is a cache. Cache is most important part in trying to meet our main requirement. Akamai is a leading cloud-based CDN service provider for media and software delivery. All of our websites are fully cached by Akamai. I found Akamai to be a powerful tool that, in addition to caching, can manage the traffic routes, can be used as a load balancer, can rewrite URLs, perform personalization, and a lot of other things. Akamai help us to implement blue-green deployments. At the beginning of UITU production deployment, we force Akamai to route all traffic to the green group using PowerShell command and start deployment, and then we start deploying to the blue group. Once it is deployed, we are able to verify that everything is fine, and then we route traffic to the currently deployed blue group and start deploy to the green group. At the end, we force Akamai to route traffic to both groups, and in this case, we have 0 downtime during our deployments. Traditionally, only static content can be cached on Akamai when it is used with Sitecore. Caching images, scripts, and other static files can improve site performance by decreasing the load time on the Sitecore content delivery server, but a lot of work still remains for the CD server. Any part of website that uses personalization must be handled by the CD server. This approach appears to be simple. The visitor connects to the Sitecore instance. Sitecore builds the page. Sitecore returns page to the visitor. The problem is that puts a huge load on the Sitecore instance. So then you have start to scaling up or scaling down your environments. It also means that you cannot take a full advantage of CDN, science personalization, has to run on the Sitecore instance, the CDN use is limited to delivering images and other static assets only. But again, to meet our main requirement, we have to cache HTML as well and cache all requests to the server. Another our requirement is to be able to personalize components, and taking into account that Akamai can run personalization on edge, customers decided to utilize Uniform to connect Sitecore personalization with Akamai. A few words about Uniform. And Uniform connects Sitecore to the modern developer tools and leading CDNs. This means new sites can be developed using a Jamstack approach, connecting leading static site generation to Sitecore MVC or GSS sites and deployed to the CDN of choice for fastest performance, resilience, and global scale. Uniform moves the execution of personalization rules from CD server to Akamai. Since Akamai can deliver content to visitors much faster than properly turned up and scaled up Sitecore architecture, you end up with the fastest possible personalized Sitecore sites. To understand how it works, consider that the two things that happen when Akamai receives a request. The request is for the page that is not currently cached, called a cache miss, or the request is for page that is currently cached, cache hit. So in case when our page is not cached, Akamai must make a call to the Sitecore instance. This does slow things down, but since the personalization does not run on Sitecore instance, Sitecore is able to handle the response faster than in case of personalization response. Let's look to the diagram. So we can see the visitor do a request to the Akamai check if page is cached or not. And in our case, it is not. Akamai does request to the Sitecore CD server. In the same time, Sitecore requires the personalization rules from Akamai and get it from Uniform, and the responses represent the ECI rules. Then Sitecore build the page, responded to Akamai. Akamai put data to the cache, resolve context, and run personalization. Once it is done, Akamai responds page to the visitor. Here you can see the example of ECI tags. There is pretty simple example. We have some condition. If it's true, the Akamai will do a new request for the data, or maybe for also here can be some HTML snippet or any other data between the tags, ECI tags. It's so slow. Come on. Some problems with my presentation. It freezed. Come on. Okay. Sorry. And when Akamai has a cache for the page, this is where things get interesting, because this time Akamai has everything it needs to handle the request. It does not need to make a call to the Sitecore instance. The result is the fastest possible performance for our pages. In pursuit of reducing the number of server requests, we made a decision to utilize the Algolia search. The Algolia provides search as a service, offering web search across the client's website using externally hosted search engine. Algolia provides a very useful APIs. It can be used with React, and we have a full control over the items which need to be sent to Algolia. So as you can previously see, we have a different type of data, such as events, articles, POIs. We have a lot of dynamics components that show this data. All components get data to show from search engine based on text selected in data sources. Let's have a look at the diagram. I will explain how it works. Once authors make any content changes and push them and publish these changes, it gets to the web database. Once database is updated, these changes goes to the web index and keeps here. On one CM server, we have a scheduled task which is run every 30 minutes and get latest updated items from the index, process them and push to the Algolia. Then when GSS renders a page, it requests a JSON from the layout service. So on our web app, we have, let's say, some static components like banner, CTA, or map, and JSON from layout service includes everything what these components need to be rendered. But so this is the static components. But we also have some dynamics components, as I previously say, and data source for these components just represent some configuration for build the query to the Algolia. For example, it includes the number of results that we expect from the Algolia. So it includes some filter by templates. It also includes the text to get relevant data from Algolia. Come on. I'm sorry, my presentation very slow today. In some reason. Okay. Yes. One more important thing that allows us to achieve our main requirement is the performance budget. It defines a page size, which is guarantee that the page will be loaded faster than 1 second. The performance budget of the initially visible components of the page should be less than 750 kilobytes. I need to mention that we utilize a React Dynamics import to make the initial page weight less. Each component represents a separate JavaScript and CSS chunk and is loaded dynamically when the component reaches the visible area. We have implemented a custom workflow state which pass the items through the performance budget validation, and if validation is failed, item cannot be published. So also we can see that we have different requirement for the time. So for the load times, depending of the network where the page is requested. Supporting Sitecore Forms by GSS was announced along with Sitecore 9.3. To be able to use forms, you have to add the Sitecore GSS forms and Sitecore GSS React forms modules to your GSS app. Nothing required from the server side, and it works fine out of the box. We have faced only one issue with the cache of anti-foreign token. This token is unique for each form loading, but we have got it cached, and all form submission were failed. Unfortunately, we didn't find any elegant solution and just excluded the whole page from the Akamai HTML cache. The next scene, which is pretty nice in GSS, it's extensibility, and the most interesting and most easy scene that you can extend it's layout service context. So we can compare it with Sitecore context in original.NET Sitecore solution in the CMIN, and it includes some context data like site, language, state, and editing mode and other things. But we use it to also to keep some configuration data. We can see that we add some tokens for Algolia, for Google API. So there was a question about security, and but anyway, so all these keys will be used by JavaScript, and you can store it anyway. But if you can reach it by JavaScript, everybody can read it anyway. You can easily provide it by JavaScript by layout service. There's nothing unexpected. Also, we extend our context with some breadcrumbs stuff and alternative URLs. It is something which is common for whole page. It is not related for some specific components. All components can use this data. There are two ways to define how rendering and associated data are serialized. Oh, sorry. A serialized rendering content resolver. It can two ways, so it can be rendering content resolver and component GraphQL query. So, for example, we have a JSON rendering, which I created for the demo. It is component with default rendering content resolver, which serializes a data source item if it's set for the components on the page. So we add the component to the page and choose previously. So we have it. I created a template for the demo, which includes 3 fields: title, description, and image. And then I create some item as a data source based on this template. Then I added the component to the page and choose this data source for this item. Actually, in layout service, I got this component serialized with data from our data source. We can see the 3 fields here: title, description, image. Then I want to do the same with GraphQL query, and we can see that I extended with some additional data. Previous example include just the data source part, where I get data source and context item as an input parameters to the function. Then I reach this item and read fields from data source. In addition, I add to the JSON to our response the title from the context item. And another thing which we utilize for our components, it's a dictionary. We don't use the original dictionary service just to avoid an unexpected data coming from server. We just built a custom structure where we put all component related dictionary to the folder and then just retrieve it by pass. And finally, our JSON looks like on the image. We can see data source still pretty the same. We have additional level here like a GSS. GSS is a function which will automatically recognize if it's editing mode, and if it is, it also add some editable stuff here to be able build some experience editor stuff. Then we can see the context page item, title for the context page, and then we can see the list of dictionaries where we have only one dictionary here. And then I tried to do the same with rendering content resolver. I implemented custom rendering resolver, and the code looks like on the image. So we need to have some field IDs or field names. We need to get data from the field. Then we need to check if it's experience editor mode or not. If it's experience editor, we need to add additional data here. Then, sorry, I always forgot that it's not Visual Studio. And then if it's not experience editor, we just respond the values. And in this example, I didn't get the dictionary, so we can add one more section and some more code for retrieve the dictionary. Then you need to build your solution. You need to deploy the assembly to the web root and wait until application pool will be recycled. In my point of view, utilizing the GraphQL looks much more flexible and faster, but you always need to be careful about the template naming. It doesn't like, so I mean the GraphQL doesn't like the templates with the same name. It always adds some GUID under the template name, so it's not very useful, but it is better if you will try to keep your template's name is unique, even between the different websites. A few extensions that we implemented for our GraphQL. We added some site-specific item query. It allows us to request items by relative passes. By default, GraphQL doesn't know how to do that. Actually, you can just use the full item pass to get it. But in our case, we have a few different websites, and we have some configuration. We have the same structure for the websites, and all sites have the same configurations, but different values for that. And we use the relative passes to get some settings. The same thing that we customize, it is search query. The search works fine out of the box, but it doesn't know how to search and cannot search by ID. It is required for us. We get some, so the parameters like context item and data source item, which is showed on previous images, includes the IDs. And if you want to find some items under the current item, you have only one thing, is use the context item parameter, but it includes an item ID, but GraphQL cannot search by item ID by default. So we customize this logic. Another thing is item resolving process. Or standard Sitecore solution has the processor item resolver, which you can always override. You can add your own custom item resolvers, and you have to put it to HTML request begin pipeline. But in case of using layout service, you also need to implement additional custom item resolver and put it to the MVC request begin section pipeline. It is also important thing because sometimes we get some misunderstanding why when I put the URL to the browser, I get the correct item, but when I try to retrieve this item from layout service, I get 44 error, for example, because the item cannot be found because the layout service item resolver is not overridden with necessary logic. Also, very simple thing that GCS cannot do by default, at least I don't know if it's fixed or maybe implemented in Sitecore 10, but previously it was not working with virtual directories. For example, we have site A with website.com domain, and we have a site B with some virtual directory. It spreads in different websites, but they use the same domain and different virtual directories. And when you just try to request the homepage with website from the website.com, it will work fine. But if you will add the virtual directory to the layout service request, it will respond the 44 error because layout service doesn't resolve the virtual directory by default. We also have to override some item resolver processor to make it possible. Another thing is that there is some problems and some issues to work with global content. As I showed at the beginning of presentation, we have some global content, and when we try to retrieve the page, and so we use the wildcard items to understand as a starting point for our website to search some dynamic some global content, and then we override the item resolver and try to replace the context item with the item from global data folder, and then GSS tries to resolve, in this case, GSS up template, and by default it just gets the item path and try to find root item and try to find then configuration for the GSS app. As our global folder is not a site, it definitely doesn't have GSS app configured, and it always fails. And we have override this processor that you on the screen to make it possible working with global content. And probably last thing that I want to say is probably the main issue that we faced is the communication between front-end and back-end developers. Actually, our customer decided to use to work with different and separate vendors to do the back-end and front-end. Actually, our company do just back-end stuff, and another company did the front-end. The front-end guys was coming and join us a few months later, and probably almost all contracts were done before they come to the project. But the contracts were done from our perspective, so from our point of view, and it doesn't mean that front-end developers has the same view, and it raised a lot of changes and misunderstandings and communications. It was difficult because it's difficult when front-end developer doesn't know how experience editor works with Sitecore, and I can't imagine how the front-end developer who never worked with Sitecore previously can build the page and support the experience editor. So it's in my point of view, it's impossible. But after the few months, we have our front-end developers had some background in Sitecore, and the things become easy. But at the beginning, it was very, very difficult. So the communication is very, very important thing in their GSS projects. And probably that's all from my side. Thank you for attention.
Well, thank you, Artsem. We just have 3 minutes. If anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I have one question, maybe two.
Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you, Artsem, for such a deep dive on your question. And I always thought that brilliant guys can talk forever about their solutions. Question is Sitecore first or code first approach? Did you come up with that by your own, or is it something well known?
So we had a lot of templates. We have a lot of pages, and it was really impossible to do from the code first, actually. So the content editors become working much more early than templates, all components were done. So there is very difficult to work with code first. It's really for small single page applications, probably for campaign websites, but it's very difficult for the project that we're working almost for a year.
Right. Like second question, I mean, I'm not the GSS guy, I'm not the front ender, but this Akamai cache, is there any alternative to Akamai cache? Did you consider any alternatives to Akamai?
To use the Akamai was a decision of consultancy agency that our customer works with before started the project, and actually we didn't do this choice. Actually, I have never worked with another cache engines.
Okay, but it sounds like you are satisfied with how it works, right?
Yeah, so our client was using Akamai previous with Sitecore 7, and they did a lot on the Akamai side. But yes, it's a very powerful tool, actually. Yeah, I satisfied, definitely. I don't know how much it costs, but I think a lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. It's actually already time for our next presentation. Akshay?
You don't want to give people some time to pee and walk around? Jeez.
Oh.
Come on, Anders. You could do better than that.
I'm sure people... I don't know what people are doing at home, just online here. So,
that is true. You can't blame them.
No. Well,
can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh wow, Mr. President.
Yes.
I like that. What are you using? The OBS Studio or something?
Yeah, OBS.
Nice.
And then fake cam through. What are you talking about? I'm sitting here at my table at home. No, I guess, yeah, you should just get started. We're right on time. So
no worries. I'll get started if you can see my screen.
Yes, we see it. Thanks.
All right. So today we'll be talking about integrating Sitecore Content Hub with any external application. I am Akshay Sura. If you do not know me, I would like to be your friend. I've been doing Sitecore for quite a bit of time, for over 13 years. If you need any help or guidance or anything of that sort in the Sitecore community space, you can reach out to me on Slack or Twitter or any other social network. So getting right into it, There's two major ways of integrating into Content Hub. One is REST API. Just like all other REST APIs, you have complete control over the calls you make. You don't have to pull in any external libraries, but you do have to wire up everything yourself, including the calls to each of the APIs, provide all the attributes. And again, they're fairly well, the good amount of APIs let you do whatever you need to. So based on the functionality you want to achieve, you could mix and match different APIs to achieve the goal you're looking for. It's almost like you have a recipe with all the ingredients. You can mix it and you can bake it. You could bake it into a cake or a cupcake if you want, or a pancake for that matter. The REST API is fairly well documented, so most of the documentation on Style Labs is very decent. As long as you have a little bit of background, you've played with the Content Hub instance, might have a little bit of training. The docs do predominantly most of the job, but they are fairly well kept up to date, and you could update it yourself or recommend an update as well if you want to. So in order to make a REST API-based call, you need a couple of different things in order to get the token, security token. So you do need to add a user, give appropriate permissions for different sections. You also need to add or use an existing OAuth client secret. So essentially, if you can make a call from Postman, you should be able to pretty much make a call from any piece of technology you're trying to integrate Content Hub into. So IoT devices, you name it, you got it. You can make a web call. You should be able to integrate with Content Hub using the REST API. There's a on the SDK end, you have a JavaScript SDK, and until yesterday, I didn't really get into it. So I started looking into the JavaScript SDK. Don't really know much about it, but it does have a good amount of extraction. So you do get to install an NPM module. So if you have a React or an Angular-based app, you could install the JavaScript SDK. Gives you all the methods in there for you to connect, as well as to call Content Hub to get various entities and so on. The final piece, which is what I wanted to talk about, is the Web Client SDK. Now, this is external libraries you will be pulling in via a NuGet feed into your solution. They are pre-built, so you don't have to do low-level calls. You could integrate it pretty easy. You don't have to spend quite a bit of time. So one of the things I'm hoping to show you is an ASP.NET Core MVC app, which I wrote, which pulls content from Content Hub, and it literally took me like 10 to 15 minutes to do it. Really not that hard. So this is more like a box of cake where you just mix the ingredients and throw it into the oven and you're done with it. Again, the documentation is there. It's fairly well documented. Content Hub by itself, when you're trying to work with it, and I'll show some of this, the challenges I faced and how I figured it out, just how they store and expose the raw entity itself makes it easier for you to look at what you need to do in order to have different actions on using the methods instead of the SDK. Again, like I mentioned, it's a gated NuGet feed, so if you have access to it, you could pretty much pull whatever you need to, and you essentially pull the NuGet. They keep it pretty well updated. So this one was updated in June, and I'm using 3.4.1, but they seem to be updating it quite often. There are a few examples out there. So this one is an older example, but it does give you an idea of how the Web Client SDK can be used, how they connect, how they query for entities, how do you add one, how do you add relationships. So this is a good base point to take a look at to get used to it. Chris Williams also has a repo which you can pull. So Chris likes developing Visual Studio Code. It works for him. So you use the script files, and it's very similar to the scripts you write inside of Content Hub. I personally use the .NET Core apps from Visual Studio itself, because the scenario I'm trying to use is external integrations coming in, pushing and pulling a lot of data. So for me, that works. But either would work. From a Web Client SDK perspective, it gives you all the pre-built methods already for you to do a bunch of things with entities and Content Hub, but you can also make raw API calls from the web client. So you're not restricted to just the web client SDK. You are able to make API calls using the raw method if you want to. Three main entities. There's several entities in Content Hub depending on the version you're using. Depends how much you can manipulate or add new entities or not. But the three which I wanted to go over are m.asset, which is what is used in digital asset management, m.pcm.product, which is used in product content management, and m.content, which is used in content marketing platform. So three main entities, but there's quite a few things which link to it. So there's like product families, catalogs, content types. So there's quite a few which you can deal with, but these are the three which stand out. Before we get into the demo part of it, I just wanted to quickly run through this. So similar to the old SQL days, and I have not done SQL in quite a bit of time directly in a while, but you had relationships where you had one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many. Similar fashion inside of Content Hub, entities relate to each other. There's relationship objects in between, which try to relate one to many parents, many children, one-to-one, things of that sort. So I just wanted to quickly call that out. So from a demo perspective, get to that. What I wanted to show you guys, looks like I didn't open it yet. So I'm not quite sure how many of you guys have used Content Hub or not in the past, but I'll quickly go through Content Hub, and this is one of our demo instances. And while we do that, so by default, this is one of the demo instances, like I mentioned, every single screen. So this is a web SaaS-based offering, which is offered to customers, right? So depending on the brand you're currently working on, you could customize it to look, feel exactly like what the brand looks. So that from a CSS perspective, from logos or fonts, you could customize this whichever way you want. You could customize every single page with the layout you want, which most works for you. And depending on the products you purchase, typically when you buy PCM, you get DAM with, well, you have to get DAM with it. But from a product perspective, there's like any other product storage system. You have catalogs, and again, you can have multiple catalogs, and you have product families, which are really categories. You could have, again, multiple of them. They may or may not relate to a catalog or a product. You could span it across all your products if you choose to. And then there's products themselves. Each of these entities you could customize to, obviously how it fits your organization. So you go through this process of domain model definition when you first get Content Hub, and you walk through with the Content Hub team and actually build on how exactly you're going to store your products, your assets, your content. Again, every single piece on here is customizable. So you could have multiple panels. You could have panels based on conditional logic. So if product is of type something, then you can hide or show a panel required, and all. It's actually pretty extensive. You have your own workflow for a different type of asset. You could obviously link a product to different assets, product to different pieces of content. Same goes for assets themselves, and I think DAM is one of the most complicated piece in Content Hub, just because of the number of things you need to do with it. So from an asset perspective, think about PDFs, images, videos, anything you can think of. There's processing involved. You can customize how images are processed when they get uploaded. You could create compressed images in terms of size or just the dimensions, things like that. Again, all of these panels are customizable. For instance, you could say if this image is of type product, then show the product details section. If not, hide it. There's quite a bit of metadata which comes by default when you upload it, and then once you get into DRM, it kind of gets a little bit complicated. And again, all of them have their own workflows. The last piece I want to quickly show is CMP. So as you can see, I have a type of user group. So CMP runs off of a base entity called as m.content. m.content needs a type. So you can define your different types based on the kind of storage you're trying to store, for instance. So this is one of the contents of type user group. So the base entity is m.content, but the type is user group. So depending on that, you get access to a few fields. So the stuff on the left, which you see, is content area, for the lack of a better word. So you can add a piece of content and attach a bunch of assets to it. On the right is the details part. So this part of an asset or a piece of content, you could have complicated fields in here, and we'll get into that. And one of the interesting pieces of this, and this is what I was talking about in terms of dealing with knowing which exact actions to take on a specific entity, kind of gets complicated. So when you look at it from a very raw perspective, this is how it's visually, this is how it's raw. You can learn a lot from it. So for instance, you know the ID for it. These are the fields a base content, m.content can store. But as you notice, the ones I added, which are of type blog, which are of type user group, and there's another type, I forget the name of it, but the field names differ just because, you know, I manually added them. They don't come by default. The fields themselves, these basically tell me that these are not culture specific, because if they're culture specific fields, you'll see something like this, which is culture and value. Some relationships, so this was the one I was talking about. As a m.content entity, you do have to assign it to a content type, and it's related to a content type called user group, and it's a parent to child relationship, and it is locale based. And then if you wanted to take a look at the user group type itself, you can go to that and take a look at what the metadata for that is. And how this helps is when you're trying to say add a content type and you have no clue how to do it, when you look at this feed, you know that it is of this type, and you have to attach a parent of type content type, and you have to give it a value of an ID and somehow link to it, right? Then the same thing happens with other types. So a state, in order to assign a specific state as well. So it kind of gets a little bit easier once you get into it. The manage section is pretty much a place where you'll probably spend quite a bit of your time on, depending on how much work you do on the management part. But what I wanted to show you is the content types themselves. So by default, you get certain content types by default with the system. Bruce isn't one of them, promotion isn't one of them, but you could define your own custom types. Like I mentioned, the one in the content area on the left, you only have 3 types of fields, but when you go into the details part, you have much more different amount of selection for the field types, and option lists are basically drop downs when you have a small subset of values. Taxonomies are a little bit more complicated with hierarchical data set. And again, you could link a piece of content to other pieces of content, assets and products and fun stuff. So you can make it as complicated as you want. And it's pretty decent so far. I love the API, all the work I've done. I haven't had to do anything custom. I've just been able to use what I have so far. So what I'm going to do is I have a sample .NET Core app, which I usually use to run migrations from XP or external product systems into Content Hub. So I'll just specify some values to create a user group. So let me go ahead and hit that. So what this is doing, and this is again, depends on the style of your working, how you wanted to do things. So you could go ahead and write a .NET app which does this for you locally on your machine or on another environment. What I like to do in the way I build things is I like using Azure functions, and I'll tell you a reason why in a second. So to quickly go through how I added that piece of content. So I do have the web client SDK added as references through NuGet. I am connecting to the Content Hub, and then I impersonate a user. So usually when you're trying to do assets or anything which should follow a content workflow or a certain workflow. I like to impersonate the user before creating things, because you add that piece of content or an entity in a specific workflow so that things can be followed. So assume you're adding it as a super user, then you're probably going around a lot of things you shouldn't be going around. And then it's a matter of just saying, hey, I want to create a new entity, and all of these are based on IDs or definition names. So as you can see, for a product is m.pcm.product, for content it's m.content. As you notice, I'm creating something of type content because CMP by default entity is m.content, but then I would need to assign it to a definition of type user group. So for blog, it's nice and clean, as you can see, but a user group, it is weird because I created it. So what we are hoping to do is create a piece of content, set attributes, and again, these are just name values, right? So if you go look at it, it's just the name of the field. And again, these, if they're locale specific, culture specific, you would have to specify the culture you're adding an attribute value for. In this case, the attributes I have are not culture specific, so I don't need to specify that. Here, essentially what we're doing is we're trying to add a parent-to-child relationship to content type, in this case, of type user group. Same exact way, we're trying to add content lifecycle relationship. Both of these are one-to-one, child-to-parent, but this one is one-to-many, parent-to-many children. And what we're trying to do is set the activity state for this one, and then you ended up saving it. It's all it takes. It's super fast, and you can do a lot of things. And again, you can add things to query stuff and a whole shebang. One of the reasons I do end up, and I don't want to go through the entire code for this, but the reason I go through and do it on Azure Functions is just for the sake of scale. So in recent times, when we're trying to push these pieces of content, which are hundreds and thousands of these content items getting pushed from either a product system or from a Sitecore CMS and the assets you're pushing up, a lot of processing is happening, and you can't imagine it happening on a person's machine or even on a server, right? But we want these as individual units, almost like individual threads running. But where it becomes more apparent is when you're trying to create assets. So the only way to create and load assets through API is you give it a public URL link to load the asset. So for instance, I'm trying to upload a video, so I create the asset, set all the metadata I need to, but then I need to create a fetch job to say, hey, by the way, I created this asset, go get the video file from this public URL, and you provide the public URL, create a fetch job, and then at that point, you have to sit and wait for that fetch job to complete. And as you can imagine, if it's something small like an image, which is a meg, it'll be done pretty quickly. But a video file, which might be 50, 100, a couple of 100 meg, it might take quite a bit of time, or a PDF, which is like 50 meg, right? So we have a fetch job, which is basically sitting and checking every 15 seconds to say, hey, am I done? Am I done? Am I done? So once it's done is when we know the asset is attached to the file itself. Then we can create a public link and then go back and update the system from which it originated, which takes time, and each asset will take different time. So because of that, I find it very easy for me to just push everything into an Azure function, and it pushes it through queues, and it just waits and things get done. So it makes life a little bit easier. The other thing I wanted to show you guys, let me refresh, see, we should probably get it, but. So this is running on my local, something I just spun up yesterday. Again, super easy. There's not a lot of code on here. So essentially, I'm connecting to the API saying that I need all content types of type m.content, checking if they are of type user group. And if they are, I'm just listing it on this MVC.NET Core app. So again, super easy, not complicated at all. I found the APIs to be very easy to get whatever functionality you need to get done. That's pretty much, I can answer your questions, but I wanted to quickly go through this. So we do have a couple of webinars on Content Hub coming up. So if you're interested, go to konobos.com/webinars and sign up. The supercharged product strategy, which I'm doing with Chris, is mainly for walking through how people struggle with hundreds and thousands of products as well as assets associated with them. So it's a product specific strategy on how you deal with it, how you can set up your Content Hub PCM in a way that it makes your life easy. The second one, which is Look Before You Leap, is actually very interesting to me. It's more for people who are looking into Content Hub, who are hoping to purchase something similar to Content Hub, what it gives you, and what's the process. And I think one of the biggest things we suffered is we didn't know what the process of dealing with the domain models, getting them added, how do you test it out, how do you make it customized to your organization and the entire process, how do you have a migration strategy in place is essentially what is missing out there. So we're hoping to educate people on that, and just the fact that Content Hub is so misunderstood. It's one of my favorite products in Sitecore nowadays, but we look at it too much from a web perspective, and that's a big issue, that you look at content from just a web-only perspective and just think about different channels. The other one, which I'm doing with Sumit on this symposium track on day 2, is more about integrating Content Hub CMP with the CMP connector with Sitecore. There's a DAM connector as well, but this mainly concentrates on the CMP connector, how it's powerful enough to sync items to your local instance, as well as the roadmap and what's coming up, and a demo on that. And as usual, I should be very reachable on the public channels, so do reach out to us. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you guys have. With that, I will stop rambling, and I am more than happy to answer any questions you guys might have. Quiet. Did I do such a great job? No, I didn't.
You did very well. I wish I had more time to look into Content Hub. There are so many new concepts, and yeah, so much to look at. No one has raised their hands.
Woohoo! I like that when I don't get any questions. It means I'm scot-free.
That means you did a perfect job, I guess.
Well, maybe.
Well, yeah. Maybe everyone's asleep. Who knows?
Yeah. All right. Yes. Thanks. So thank you for attending the user group and watching the presentations. Go on, Anders.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for giving this presentation, Akshay, and thanks to everyone for still listening in. If anyone is still there,
I'm here always.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's it for the presentation. So yeah, now it's party time.
Where's the beer?
I don't know. I have.
Where's the Pentia beer?
On fridge.
Yeah, in your kitchen.
I thought actually you're still working. You can't have beer.
Says who? It's 5 o'clock somewhere, right?
Yeah.
8 o'clock somewhere. Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys. It was good. Very, very good. Busy conference.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect. See you all.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Please provide feedback on this format for future user groups. Just yeah, write a comment on Meetup if you have any comments. Or
I think also we would like to request the speakers for their presentations to be uploaded to the Meetup.
Thank you. Yes, that's it for tonight. Have a great evening or a good day, or yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. You too.
See you soon.
Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.